This is a NewsWatch 10 special report, the acquittal of Claus von Bülow. Here is NewsWatch 10 investigative reporter Jim Taricani.
Good evening. By now, most of you know that Claus von Bülow is a free man. Earlier today, 8 women and 4 men found him not guilty of twice trying to kill his wife. With us this evening is Mr. von Bülow and his defense team, Thomas Puccio, John Sheehan, and Peter DiBiase. We'll be talking with them in a moment, but first, the trial lasted 9 weeks, one of the longest criminal trials in the state's history. It also drew heavily on the resources of the state and attracted attention from around the world. Here's a look back at the trial from those blustery spring days about 2 months ago. On April 7th, von Bülow, his daughter Cosima, and his girlfriend Andrea Reynolds arrived at the Biltmore Hotel. There was one Channel 10 news crew there to greet them. The next day, when von Bülow showed up at the courthouse for the first day of jury selection, a small army of print and broadcast journalists from around the world surrounded him as he made his way into the building. Courtroom number 8, the stage for this soap opera trial. Judge Corinne Grandy directing. Starring for the prosecution, boyish-looking Mark DeSisto, Henry Gemma, Lieutenant Jack Reese, and Sergeant Joe Miranda. For the defense, Chief Attorney Thomas Puccio, John F. Sheehan, and Peter DiBiase. A host of extras, sheriffs, clerks, stenographers, the public, VIPs, the jury, and the star of the show, Claus von Bülow. It took 9 days to select a jury. Once that was done, the first order of business was to bring the jury to the scene of the alleged crime, the opulent von Bülow mansion at Clarendon Court in Newport. Again, the media outnumbered all others, using cherry pickers and even helicopters to photograph the event. Von Bülow hadn't been at the mansion for more than 4 years. When he made his way onto the grounds and saw the dogs he used to walk, the memories were apparently too much for him. The normally stoic von Bülow broke down and cried for a moment. But he quickly composed himself and went into the mansion with the jury tour. After his opening argument, the young, mild-mannered prosecutor, Mark DeSisto, wasted no time in putting a big gun on the stand, Maria Schrellhammer, Sunny von Bülow's personal maid. She wasn't on the stand for 2 minutes before she gave a graphic description in her heavily accented German voice of how Sunny looked just before going into her first coma.
You said you tried to arouse her or wake her up. What did you do?
When I took the cane to her, I shook her. I didn't get any response.
She didn't wake up?
No.
Was she still moaning?
She was still moaning.
When you touched her, can you describe her body temperature?
She was cold.
And then the German maid testified about the smoking gun, the infamous black bag containing the alleged attempted murder weapons, drugs, needles, syringe, and insulin. She had seen the bag before, without a bottle of insulin in it. But around Thanksgiving of 1980, she saw it again and showed it to von Bülow's stepson, Alexander von Osberg.
I was holding it in my hand and I said to Alexander, insulin, for what insulin?
Knowing that Maria was one of the prosecution's strongest witnesses, defense attorney Puccio wasted no time in trying to destroy her credibility on cross-examination.
Miss Schrellhammer, it's a fact, is it not, that you in the past have lied under oath in an effort to protect Mrs. von Bülow. Is that not a fact?
No, I don't know this.
The drama inside the courtroom was countered by the comedic performance of the media outside of the courtroom. It became a daily ritual, the walk to lunch, with the star of the show swamped by reporters and photographers as he made his way to the Brown Faculty Club. This trial had a dab of courtroom theatrics when defense lawyer John Sheehan had himself scratched to help disprove the state's claim that Sunny struggled with Claus just before lapsing into one of her comas. Sheehan's theatrics proved useful because eventually Judge Grandy barred the state from presenting evidence about the so-called struggle theory. And although Judge Grandy maintained a serious manner throughout the trial, her good sense of humor produced some laughter from time to time. One witness seemed to forget that all judges are not men.
Those are the so-called fingernail scrapings?
Yes, ma'am. Or yes, Your Honor. Excuse me. I apologize.
As the trial continued, the suspense began to rise when it became apparent that another star witness for the prosecution, former soap opera actress Alexandra Isles, was hiding in Europe and had no intention of testifying. In von Bülow's first trial, Isles, von Bülow's former lover, provided damaging testimony, saying she loved Klaus, and Klaus, feeling that he had an ultimatum, namely divorce Sunny and marry Alexandra, allegedly planned to get rid of Sunny. Judge Grandy threw prosecutors into a depressed state when she ruled that the state had not done enough to find Isles, so her testimony from the first trial could not be read at this one. That meant no motive testimony for the state, a serious blow to its case. But Grandy gave the state the long Memorial Day weekend to find her, and find her they did. Lieutenant Jack Reese secretly negotiated her return. Bright and early on the morning of May 28th, Isles was center stage once again, testifying against her former lover. Her testimony this time was just as or more damaging than the first trial, and this time the former TV soap opera actress showed her feistiness under rigorous cross-examination by defense attorney Puccio.
Well, you're saying that you wrote a letter saying that you wanted to continue.
Have you ever been in love?
I doubt it, but you do some crazy things.
Von Bülow's stepchildren, Alexander von Osberg and Annie Alla Kneisel, testified against their stepfather as they did in the first trial. Their most dramatic appearances, however, came outside the courtroom. At a news conference in New York City when they were appealing for the return of Alexandra Isles, von Bülow's stepchildren, in no uncertain terms, let the world know how they feel about their stepfather.
Claus von Bülow, as a defendant, is entitled to a fair trial. But as a victim, so is our mother. Our mother has been deprived, in effect, of her life. Please don't let our mother be deprived of justice.
Most of the evidence in this case came from doctors. The state tried to show that Sunny was, indeed, injected with exogenous insulin, meaning insulin from outside the body.
Now, doctor, do you have an opinion, based upon your review of the records and based upon your experience and your training, and based upon a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether or not the insulin was endogenous or exogenous?
By all the data that I've looked at, it would be exogenous.
Do you have an opinion as to the cause of Martha von Bülow's coma on December the 27th, 1979?
I do.
What is that opinion?
An excess of insulin.
But the defense team produced its own impressive string of doctors to counter the state's claims. First, they tried to show that the alleged attempted murder weapon, the needle, was not injected into anyone.
Your opinion was that that needle would not have been injected, is that right?
On the basis of the incrustations, I would say that the needle was not injected.
Okay.
Then, defense witnesses from all around the country and the world testified that insulin did not cause Sunny's
Your
comas.
opinion, please.
I think that she was suffering from an acute hypoxia, shortage of oxygen to the brain, which was the primary fact, and various subsequent secondary facts may have contributed to its continuation.
Mrs. von Bülow suffered first respiratory arrest and then circulatory collapse.
And that coma was not caused by an insulin injection.
The complicated and sometimes confusing medical testimony dominated the trial, and although many people felt that von Bülow would take the stand himself this time, he didn't. His daughter Cosima was going to testify, but only if her father took the stand. Von Bülow wanted to, but defense attorney Thomas Puccio talked him out of it, saying that the medical experts presented by the defense proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Sunny was not injected with insulin by Claus von Bülow. And in his dramatic 2.5-hour closing statement to the jury, Puccio over and over again used the words,
"No insulin injection,"
shouting those words to the jury. And Puccio attacked one of the most impressive witnesses for the state, Sunny's maid, Maria Schrellhammer. Maria was extremely loyal to Sunny, and Puccio said if she really did find insulin, needles, and syringes in the black bag before Sunny's second coma, she would have told Sunny all about it.
If in fact she saw, as she says she did, a bottle that said insulin, needles and syringes, bells would have gone off. Bells would have gone off and the whole world would have known at that very moment.
And with an outstanding delivery of his own, prosecutor Mark DeSisto's closing argument was highlighted by a picture he tried to paint for the jury, a picture of a man in love with another woman and getting rid of his wife.
He loads his needle and syringe with insulin. He goes to his wife. Can you see the intent? What's he thinking? And he finds the spot. And now he's pressing the plunger in. And what is he thinking? As that insulin is released into her body, what is he thinking? Can you see it? He's pressing the plunger down and the insulin is going in and it's releasing all the tension. He's going to be with Alexandra Isles. He doesn't have to find a job. Can you see it?
Obviously, the jury couldn't see it. After this brief message, we'll be back to talk to Mr. von Bülow and his defense team. Mr. von Bülow, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Now that it is all over, how do you feel?
A great feeling of relief, but above all of gratitude to the defense team, and principal ones are here, but I want to mention Joanne Crispy and Andrew Citron, who've now been on this case for, I think, 3.5 years.
And those were the two who were sitting behind you throughout the entire trial?
They were behind us, and were, I'm sure, Tom and John and Pete would agree, invaluable in their knowledge of the case. And of course Alan Dershowitz, without which there wouldn't have been a case.
Mm-hmm. Was there any point where you feel the case was lost, where you felt the case was lost?
No, that is not so. I think obviously there were a great many ups and downs in this case, and that made it at times hard. I think in the early stages of the case, there were moments when it seemed as if the prosecution was doing very badly. But that I did not feel, and I felt so confident of the medical picture, which is where it was really at, that I would call these other aspects ancillary. On hindsight, I definitely feel that it was best that everything was admitted, that in fact Alexandra Isles did come back and testified, because it means they threw everything at me that they could. Mm-hmm. And so there was no missing link.
Speaking of Alexandra Isles, as it was testified to, or not testified to, but your attorney, Mr. Puccio, brought this up, that you were just stringing her along, that you weren't serious about her. Were you serious about her at any point?
Yes, that I was, but I think this is so much what I'd call in perceptions, and all of us in our dealings with other humans, we may have ideas about how the other person feels and so on. I'm not proud of my own conduct there, but that's not what I was charged with.
Mm-hmm. You decided not to take the stand, or your attorneys decided not to take the stand. Since it's all over now, can you tell us anything about your version, in simple terms perhaps, of what did happen to Sunny von Bülow, your wife?
I don't know. I know that I'm totally convinced by the medical picture. I know I didn't do anything. Obviously, it's very difficult to defend yourself when you haven't done anything. Somehow or other, if you've done something wrong, you may know where there's a weakness in the prosecution. I just don't know. This is a total tragedy. I believe it was triggered by the 216, which was an erroneous result, and that people with the best of intentions went on from there, and then it got out of control.
Was your wife having problems with alcohol and drugs?
I think problems, I want to stress one thing. Everybody has said that I've accused Sunny of being an alcoholic. I've never used that word. In fact, that word originated with Dr. Stock in 1976. When there was a problem, there was a problem. But from there to describing anybody as an alcoholic would be very wrong.
What type of relationship do you maintain now with your wife? What happens from here on out?
Relationship is a difficult word to use in those circumstances. I think somebody, I used to travel a great deal. I traveled about 150,000 miles a year. You can be 6,000 miles away from someone and they are with you as if they were in the room. And Sunny is somebody whom I loved, whom I still love the memory of. This whole story is a tragedy. Because Sunny and I had difficulties in our marriage does not mean that there was not emotion between us. It was a difficulty about work.
Maria Schrailhammer, who is one of the state's prime witnesses, or what they call the strongest witnesses. Do you think Maria Schrailhammer was trying to frame you?
I don't like words like that. I think Maria Schrailhammer disliked me from day one and never missed an opportunity for indicating that to members of the household and so on. She was, in fact, a superb professional servant. And while Sunny was around, there were no real possibilities of anything going wrong of that kind. But
do you think she was the driving force, perhaps, to your stepchildren, Alexander and Alla, in their involvement in this whole matter? Do you
well,
think
I
they
think
would have
the
gotten
evidence
involved?
shows that.
It wasn't
the evidence
Maria?
shows that.
Mr. Puccio.
Go ahead. I'm just so sorry that Alla and Alexander never went to Sunny or to me. Sunny would have been the strongest defense witness to any allegations.
Mr. Puccio, was it a calculated risk not putting Mr. von Bülow on the stand? Most people thought he would this time. As we know, Claus wanted to go on the stand.
Well, I think it's always a risk when a defendant doesn't take the stand, but in analyzing this case, we felt it relied so heavily on the medical testimony, and there really wasn't, as you've heard, much that Claus could say that would be helpful one way or the other. So we went with the medical testimony.
I see. Were there any big surprises in this case? Were you surprised when they found Alexandra Isles, when the state found her finally?
I don't know if they found her or she decided at some point to come in. I think we always felt that there was a good chance if the tape or the transcript were excluded that she would show up, and we started this case with the understanding that she would be a witness. We prepared this case with the expectation that she would testify. So although it was in doubt for some time, it didn't really matter.
How would you assess the performance of Judge Grandy throughout this trial? You're new in this state. You've never
It's
argued
difficult
a case.
having won a case to be viewed as speaking objectively, but I've practiced law for 15 odd years now or more, and appeared throughout the country through many judges. There is no judge that I've ever appeared before, federal or state, that is better than Judge Grandy. There are some that are as good, but I've never seen one better. I think she was brilliant, right down the middle. I don't want to be delivering a testimonial here, but I think that some of the comments, the judge was pro-defense because of a couple of rulings were wrong. She gave everyone a fair trial, both sides.
Mr. Sheehan,
Yes.
you were in the courtroom, of course, every day. You did not do much of the arguing in the courtroom. Could you tell us, first of all, what your role was? And we all know that you did an awful lot of work on this case from day one, 4.5 years ago.
Well, I think my role was to be supportive of Tom and Peter, and when asked to do something, I just did it.
The scratches on your arm when you wanted to help disprove the state's so-called struggle theory that Sunny struggled, namely with Claus, before lapsing into one of her comas. How did you get those scratches on your arm?
I used a fingernail file.
A fingernail file.
Yes.
Is that above and beyond the call of duty and legal
No,
terms?
I thought that in light of the pre-offered testimony of Dr. Worthington, when he said he could tell what scratches were, I wanted to see if he could really tell what scratches were and how they were derived. Apparently he couldn't.
I would like you to assess the performance of Mark DeSisto and Henry Gemma, the prosecutors in this case.
I think they did an excellent job. I think that their case was not strong. It was weakened by the excellent medical experts that were marshaled for the defense. But I thought that Mark, he's only been out 3 years. I think he did an excellent job, and I think Henry always does an excellent job. I've tried against Henry for 10 years now.
Mr. DiBiase, you were also one of the, let's say, silent ones in the courtroom, but there every day working on the case. What type of a role did you play in the von Bülow case?
My role from the beginning was to be a limited role, one to assist Tom and primarily with the lay witnesses to try and outline areas of cross-examination and possible presentation of certain lay witnesses.
Some mornings, all three of you would come in with frowns on your faces. Were there, let's say, heated battles in the night about how to approach a certain witness or what types of questions to ask? There had to be.
Not really. I think if you put 3 lawyers or 5 lawyers, as in our situation, in a room, in a very short time you'll emerge with 6 opinions. But I think Tom was very masterful in being able to take all of our suggestions and really use them, weave them into his presentation in a very meaningful fashion.
Mr. von Bülow, first of all, what did you think of Judge Grandy? And second of all, how would you describe your relationship with your three attorneys? What type of input did you try to put into this, let's say, in the evening hours? I'll leave here now liking each other.
I rather thought I heard two questions there. I would like to join Tom in his, in fact, eulogy of Judge Grandy. I thought I have never, in England or in this country, heard a finer judge. And with courtesy and a terrific command of the law and of her courtroom. My relations with my attorneys have always been good. I used to be an attorney, and therefore I might have my ideas, not on the law, I wouldn't know about that in this country, but it's, I think grown men can agree or disagree around a table, but there wasn't much disagreement.
Will you return to the mansion in Newport at all now?
I have no plans to do so. As you may know, Cosima has tried since 3 years to be given first a month and then just a week undisturbed in the house. In fact, she once went just for 45 minutes, but that turned out impossible also. I would hope that her brother and sister would grant her that as a sort of opening of the door, a gesture rather than words. Words don't mean very much. And allow her to go there. And I know how much it meant for me just to see the dogs.
What are your future plans? First of all, are you going to try to find a job? That's been ballied about through the press.
I have a job waiting for me.
You do?
Yes.
Can you tell us where?
No, I think I feel I've been exposed to a great deal of publicity. I don't want any of my friends to
Would it be in the financial community?
It would be a combination of things for which I believe I'm qualified. But first of all, I want a vacation, and a vacation away from it all, where I've said before, my first objective is to live longer by not smoking.
Throughout this whole thing, it's become very apparent you have a new companion or girlfriend or mistress or whatever the term you might want to use, Andrea Reynolds. Are there any plans for marriage?
No, but Andrea will be around. She's been quite extraordinary as a support for 3.5 years, and terribly important to Cosima, too. This is from the age of 15 to 18, which are years where it's vital for a young girl to have the advice and support of a grown woman.
Do you think there'll ever come a point where there'll be some type of reconciliation between yourself and Alexander and Alla? Is that feasible?
I don't see any reason why not. I bear no resentment whatsoever. There's such an adage to say time heals all wounds. These are obviously extraordinarily deep. It would very much depend on how they treat Cosima, on how fair they are there.
Since your case started, I guess, what, 5 years ago it would be? About 5 years ago from the original indictment. Is it safe to say that you spent over $1 million on your defense between legal fees and all the other expenses that go along with defending oneself?
I think it's safe to say anything when you say it. I think you're probably familiar with what legal fees are. Let's just say it's more than a sandwich lunch.
Is it more than $1 million?
I have had support I'd like to acknowledge the support of all of my friends. I haven't lost a single friend in spite of this perfectly horrible accusation and indeed conviction at one time. I've lost a few of what I'd call social acquaintances, but not one friend. And I could not have managed without that.
Mr. von Bülow, just finally, if you could sum up your feelings as you sat in that courtroom for the better part of 8 weeks, listening to the testimony again for the second time.
Yes, there was no element of shock this time. I think my element of shock came when I finally got the transcripts from the grand jury. First time you see something that is not right is the shock. It doesn't get worse by repetition.
Were there people, witnesses for the state in this trial, that you feel absolutely blatantly lied?
Yes, but I think lying, again, is a question of perception. And I think memory plays a great role here. And again, the sort of element of, what's it called? For means justify the end, and so on. I think there was a degree of preparation of witnesses, a degree of failure of memory, wanting to achieve an objective. As I said to you, I don't bear any resentment towards the principals. And yes, there were some part players that where I felt their memory was quite extraordinary in view of the circumstances. I sometimes can't remember what happened yesterday.
Okay, one last question. What's it going to be like later this week when you can wake up perhaps in New York in the morning and not have 100 reporters chasing you down the street?
Why don't you ask me that when I wake up later in the week?
I'll do that. We'll be back with more of our program right after this. Mr. Puccio, Mr. Sheehan, Mr. DiBiase, thank you for joining us this evening. And of course, Mr. von Bülow, thank you for joining us, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
That's our program for this evening. Once again, Claus von Bülow, found not guilty earlier today of twice trying to kill his wife. I'm Jim Taricani. Have a pleasant evening.